All right, welcome back to the podcast. I know things look a little different right now, but these episodes should be going live in March. And for those of you that don't know, March is
Women's History Month.
It is also Farah's
and
birthday
apparently
month.
Farah's birthday.
Also Kevin's, but we're not talking about men right now. He's doing the cameras on the side, so that's why. Okay, anyway, so March is Women's History Month. So for this month, we're going to be looking at different women in the Bible. For this episode, we're going to be talking about Tamar. So, what? Let me first get a foundation, a groundwork a little bit. What do we know who Tamar is in the Bible?
Yes.
At least a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What do we know about Tamar?
She was married 2 times.
Okay. Yeah. Do we know who Tamar is? Do you know who Tamar is? Why are you looking at me like that, Farah? All right. So. All right. So Tamar, we're gonna look at Genesis chapter 38, from verse 1 to, I believe it's the whole chapter, 1 to 30.
Okay.
It's the whole chapter. I'm gonna kind of give a brief summary, as brief as I can, because I be yapping. But so Tamar,
Yes.
she was married to, or she was picked to marry Judah's eldest son named Er is his name. But God was like, that's a wicked man. He's bad. So he got rid of him. And so, as is tradition, Tamar was then married to Er's younger brother. His name was Onan, right? And so then Judah, Onan and Er's father, Tamar's father-in-law, tells him, hey, as is tradition, I need you to impregnate her so that your brother's lineage can live on. But Onan didn't want to do that because that baby would then eat into their inheritance. So how it goes is the oldest son would get basically half of the estate or whatever was promised, and then his eldest son, along with any brothers that the father had, or the eldest brother had, would then split the rest of it evenly. So in this case, would get 50%, and then of the remaining 50%, Onan, his firstborn son, and the third brother, Shelah. And then Onan, Shelah, and Er's eldest son would have split the rest of it evenly. So if Onan were to impregnate Tamar, then her son, if it was a boy, would have his father's portion as well as his own rightful portion of the rest of it. And Onan was like, I'm not going to do that because then I lose out on what I think I deserve. And so God was also like, that's not right. You're not good, so I will get rid of you. And so if we're sensing a pattern here, based from Judah's perspective, anyone that this woman marries is dying. So traditionally, the next step would be for her to marry the next son, Shelah. But he was younger, and so Judah tells her, hey, he's too young, go back to your father's house, and then when he's of age, we'll remarry. But he sent her away because he was like, I don't want my third son to get killed again. To get killed now, right? So I'm just going to get rid of her. So he got rid of his duties as the father-in-law. His duties would be to protect her and keep her because she is now of your family. She has left her family and she has come to yours as your daughter-in-law. So therefore you were to protect her and keep her. But he was like, nah, I'm going to get rid of her. Send her back to her parents' house. And so she's there and she realizes that, like, hey, it's been a little while. Right? He should be of age. We should be, moving on with this process. But she's like, he clearly doesn't want me to marry Shelah. So Tamar then disguises herself. She puts on a little face covering, and she heard that Judah was going to the sheep shearing festival. And so she waits outside of the town where the sheep shearing festival is for Judah to come out. And as he comes out, we're assuming, it's a festival, festivities, party. He's been, partaking. He's been partaking. Yeah. And so he sees this woman on the side of the road, covered up, and he's like, hey, want to go somewhere? And they went. And so he took her to be a prostitute, right? That was waiting on the side of the road.
Yes.
And so in terms of payment, he was like, what's the rate? And he's like, I'll give you a baby goat. And she goes, well, you clearly don't have this goat on you, so in the meantime, what can I have? Or like they were negotiating. And then she goes, so I'll take your signet ring, I'll take your cords, and I will take your staff. Thank you, Far. Far, also you have a mic, so when you talk, try to use it. I just want to catch this now before we go. Yes, so she took his signet ring, she took his staff, and she took his cords. Right? These are all three very like significant individual things that
They're
no
very
one
clear
else.
identifiers.
Exactly.
Basically.
Yeah. So, and then after that, they went along their ways. And so a few months later, Judah finds out, or he hears, hey, Tamar's pregnant. And he goes, how dare she? How is she pregnant? And he accuses her of prostitution. He's like, bring her out. We're going to take care of this. We're going to take her to court, da 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 da. And then, so what she does then is she sends him a little care package, sends him a little gift, and she goes, basically, I hear you are accusing me of these things, but just so you know, these belong to the father of the child that I'm carrying. And so what she sent him was his ring, his staff, and his cords. And so he's like, oh, that's my child. Like, I did that. Because obviously he's going to remember giving these things to someone. Oh, sorry, rewind. He went to go give the goat to the prostitute. Right? And so when he had his servant delivering the goat, they were like, there's no prostitute here. Like, there's never been, never will be, never has been.
Right.
And he's like, do you know what? Let me not embarrass myself by going around and looking for a prostitute. And I'm going to just keep my goat.
It's also, we also have to, because part of the story, it says it in the story, and I feel like that it says that his wife died and he went to comfort himself at this festival. I don't know. I feel like that's an important thing because he was sad and he went to this festival to try and cheer himself up.
and that was how he ended his night.
Right.
I feel like that's very
If
telling
it ain't
about
the consequences of your actions.
period.
Exactly.
Oh no. So she sends it back to him and she's like, just so you know, this is who did this to me. And he goes, you know what? You're so right. And I'm wrong. And I would just like to applaud him for at least saying that, because how many times have you told a man, this is what you did, and they don't say, you're right, I'm wrong?
Or don't say anything.
Or don't say anything. Anyway, that's not the point of this story. But okay, so she sends him his things, and he's like, oop, you know what, you're right. So she comes back. She has her twin children, boys.
Yes.
And then, so actually, there was also a little mini scandal with the birthing of these children. Yes. So they were twins, right? They were both boys. One of them stuck their hand out of her womb, which is insane to me, first of all. He stuck his arm out. And so the midwife, nurse, whatever, tied a scarlet, ribbon, string, thread around his wrist so that they would know, hey, this one was first. Mm-hmm. Arm goes back in. The other baby then comes out. And then they were... Stays out. Yeah, he didn't go back in. He didn't come back in.
No.
Yeah, and so technically in order of birth, they reversed. Mm-hmm. But in order of, I guess, presence,
because the arm came out.
Which is also insane to me. Can you imagine you're giving birth and an arm just comes out?
I mean, it comes out eventually.
Yeah, I know, but in this order.
I know. It's something... I find it interesting because it's something that is really unexpected.
Yeah.
It's extremely unexpected. I can only imagine what that midwife was going through. Because then not only did it come out the arm, it just went
back in.
Midwife, you mean? What about her?
The mother?
No, yeah,
right?
you feel.
But I mean, would she? I don't know. I've never birthed someone, but I'm like, would you be able to differentiate
which hand?
Not just which hand, but like that this is not supposed to happen. Like, because usually it's head, shoulders first. If they're breached,
Butt first.
butt first. If they're upside down, I don't know
Right.
if that's ever happened, but
It
feet
does.
first.
Sometimes they come out feet first, and it's not a pretty picture.
Freaky.
It's not.
I feel like it's not a pretty picture in general.
It's not. It really isn't.
But we're sidetracked. Anyway, we're talking about Tamar, not
Yes.
the birthing story. Maybe we'll do that another time. Made for Mother's Day, maybe.
Yeah.
But yes, we're talking about Tamar. So that is the story that we're looking at.
Yes.
What are our general thoughts on who she is and the story in general, I guess?
I feel like part of what sticks out to me is she went about doing it not the greatest way. And I feel like that's very telling of us sometimes, of how we very much try, instead of waiting and seeing what God is going to do, we're like, you know what, it's been some time. It's been some time. I feel like, especially me, like as a wife, as a mom, eventually if something doesn't get done, you're like, okay, well, I got to do it. Like, let's go, let's get this done. But even in that, like, there was a purpose and a plan. I feel like for me, like, that's one of the things that sticks out.
I didn't think about it that way.
I think it's also like commendable that she didn't stay quiet though. Like she took things into her own hands, maybe not the right way as you said, but she I mean, I feel like back in the days, they wanted women to be very, quiet, just like, you know,
What is it? Seen and not heard.
Yes.
right.
Right.
But yeah, she was strong. She went and she got her kids one way or the another.
Yeah,
and
she really cemented her
yeah,
herself in that lineage.
I agree with Asha because, I mean, women were not able to, we're not supposed to talk back then, but at least she stood up and said, you know what, this is your child, or these two are your children, and that's that.
Yes.
You can't shame me for something that you took part of. Like, can you imagine being, wasn't it, he told them to burn her alive?
I know he was like
bring her out and let her be burned. Yes.
Yeah.
And then it says, when she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please determine who these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff. So Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shayla? Shayla?
I said Shayla.
My son. And he never knew her again. Did you say my Shayla?
Shayla.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
She would have been punished, and he wouldn't have been punished at all, which is actually ridiculous and unfair. Just like the lady who they were gonna stone.
Yes.
Yeah.
For adultery. Sorry, for adultery, they were gonna stone her, and Jesus took up for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And and with that story as well, like, you see the risk that these women took to try and save themselves. Because at the end of the day, I also feel like Tamar? Sorry.
I say Tamar.
Tamar was trying to save herself, because I'm saying it in Spanish in my head. I feel like Tamar was trying to save herself, because in that time you didn't have a father, you didn't have a husband, you didn't have a male child. It was poverty for you. You had nothing, you had nobody to provide for you. And she was trying to save herself. And just, I feel like the woman who threw herself at Jesus' feet was also trying to save herself in a different way.
Yeah.
And the difference being that, Jesus just tells her, like, get up, like, go and sin no more. But they're trying to save themselves. And I feel like that really sticks out to me.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where like she was well intended in the way that she did things, and it was like kind of a means to an end. But you can see the desperation in her to stay in that lineage, because not only was it like, I think, okay, there's a few things that I have with this, right? Because first of all, from Judah's perspective, I can kind of see like, hey, every son I married to her is being killed off, right? But we know that it was like they were wicked in God's eyes, and therefore he struck them out.
Right.
So I can see the fear or the hesitation in him setting her up with Shayla. But also as the father-in-law, she is now his responsibility. So regardless of what is happening with your sons, you are to take care of this woman.
Right.
She is now in your lineage, whether you like it or not. So when he sent her away to her family, I feel like that, if I was Tamar, I would have felt so disrespected by that. Because first of all, you picked me to marry your child. I didn't have any say in this.
Right.
You removed me from where I was in my father's house to come to this house. And now all of a sudden you don't want me no more? That's not how that works. So I think so that when I think she was very smart though.
Okay.
In the way that she did certain things, because I know I never would have been able to come up with a plan like that to cement my like lineage, cement my name in that line. Yeah. But I think she was very smart in that she made sure that she collected very specific things that no one could dispute, that you did this, that this is your child. And so the way that she just carried herself about that whole situation, I think is commendable in that she was very strong, and she was very like, she was not going to be swayed in that I know that this is where I am meant to be and this is where I belong, and I'm going to make sure that I do everything I can to stay there. Although, yes, she was very sneaky, very, very sly about certain things.
And that's the thing. I feel like Tamar sometimes gets kind of snuck under the rug, because she's not exactly, she's not a Ruth. Like, she's not a traditional woman in the Bible who, is to some extent glorified to a point that they should not be. She was, I mean, obviously they were all real women. Ruth was a real woman, and it is commendable to look up to her and all of these things. But Tamar was in a real life situation. And I feel like that also speaks to the real life situations that we are in. Like, obviously, none of us are being married off to somebody and then married
Not
to
yet,
their brother. Not yet. But we're not in that situation. But we've been in situations where our backs are against the wall and we don't have anywhere to turn to. We don't have anything to do. And like I said, sometimes it's very much, I need to get this done. I don't know what's going to happen, but I need to get this done. Like I said, like, she needs to be provided for. Like, she's probably thinking, like, I need to be provided for. It's not like I can go out and work. It's not like I can fend for myself. I need somebody to fend for me. And it's something that I think is commendable. Like we said, like, what she did wasn't exactly right. But she was very strong, and she was very decided, and she was very just kind of willing to do what she needed to do.
Yeah.
So that she could save herself.
I think a lot
and
of times,
her family.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we are in those desperate situations, we don't always do the absolute right thing, right? And I think that that's why there's certain people that are still written into the Bible to show that. Because I feel like if it was just all these righteous people that always did the right things, it wouldn't be relatable. I wouldn't be constantly turning back to the Bible if it was just showing me, well, these people did it right all the time. Right? And I think that's why it's very important that we highlight certain people. So like, yes, she didn't do things the right way, right? But she was still like strong, and she still led to the line of David, and then eventually to Jesus. Right? And I think part of what should be focused on is, again, her determination, right? Her strong will to remain in what she was placed into. And I think so. Back to what you're talking about, Ruth, right? If I'm remembering correctly, Ruth is part of her lineage,
If I'm remembering correctly, as
right?
well. Yes. No. Yes. You made a face.
He always makes faces.
Okay.
I've noticed.
Well, yes, there.
but-
It's a line of strong women,
Yeah.
and like you were saying, like I feel like that's what keeps us. At least for me, like it's like little stories like that that keep me coming back
Yeah.
to reading the word because
Exactly.
it's like that's in there, that happened, what, like, and like you said, it shows imperfect people with a perfect God.
Yeah. And it's not to justify like my wrong decisions or anything that I've done, but it's to show that it happens, right? We're human, we're people. We are not the perfect ones. But when we rely on the, like you said, the perfect God, he can help us to make those right decisions or to turn things around and to not feel as though we are so desperate with our back against the wall. So, double standards.
Oof.
Have we ever experienced double standards in our lives, women? Ladies?
Of course.
Jinx.
So, like we discussed, right? Judah, when he finds out that Tamar is pregnant, he's like, burn her. She's a prostitute. She's done da 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 da.
Right.
But he knew that in order to comfort himself after grieving his wife, that he slept with a prostitute.
Right.
Why was that not wrong for him? Why did that, like,
Why
shouldn't he
does
be
that?
burned?
Right. Why doesn't?
yeah,
Why
burn
doesn't it-
him?
My question is, where's your common sense, my guy? Because if
The
a couple months
timeline.
ago you were grieving your wife and something happened, and now all of a sudden they were like, that's
Just
a little
pure
fishy.
coincidence.
It's pure coincidence, the timing, and it's just kind of like man brain. But that's a story for another day. But it's very interesting to me, like you said, that his first. And it happens a lot, like even, and you see it in movies, you see it in different places, you see it in the Bible, like we're talking about, like he's very adamant about.
I feel like he's very righteous
Yes,
about, like,
he's very much on his pedestal saying, what did you do, and look at this, and all these things, and meanwhile she's like, you don't say.
yeah.
Interesting.
Because it's like, I want to burn you.
And
You look at what you've done to me.
but see, that's, yeah.
Not just the pregnancy, but
is
I
not
mean
easy.
like,
but
but sending her away.
exactly,
and, like, the whole,
sending her away and all of these things that he did to her, and I think that's why he realizes, once he realizes, like, oh,
yeah.
that was me, and he says, like, you have been more righteous than I. But I find it really, really interesting, not only that double standard, but just the fact that he was so gung-ho about punishing somebody else. And I feel like a lot of times, and I feel like this is, it's mentioned a couple times in the Bible, and that's why I think it's so interesting, that it'll be like, I can judge you because you did something wrong. But we're not going to pay attention to what I did
No.
wrong. And, you know, where it says, why are you looking at the speck in your
yeah.
brother's eye and not the log in yours?
Yeah.
And I feel like that theme is, it's talked through a couple times in the word, and it's such a double standard, especially when it comes to men and women. You know, a man who is 40 years old, 50 years old, and not married is fine. But once you start hitting, like, you're a woman and you start hitting like 25, and people are like,
biblical times.
oh,
Like,
but
18.
bringing it to
Yeah.
now, like
Yeah,
bringing
yeah.
it to now, the double standard now. It's still very much like, oh,
Taboo.
like, you're not married yet?
Yeah.
Like, and even in our families, like in our cultures, like Caribbean cultures, where you're like, why aren't you married yet? And I'm like, I wasn't allowed to talk to boys my whole life. What do you mean?
Yeah.
You know, like, those double standards still follow us today. Like, maybe they're not, as with cultures and things that have changed, maybe they're not exactly the situations that they were facing. It's not the same situation that Tamar was facing with needing somebody to protect her and all of these things. But those double standards are still very much alive.
Absolutely.
Very much alive. Like, I forget what it was, but I heard a story of like this. Let me simplify it. I heard a story about this guy and he was cheating on his wife, and the wife went and fought the woman,
But not the.
but not the man.
Those stories always get me tight because what are you talking about?
And I'm like, because the other woman didn't know he was married. She found out because like the wife comes in, but like she comes in and like attacks the husband. I mean, attacks the woman. And I'm like, ¿por qué? It doesn't make any sense. Like a lot of times I feel like we do that to each other. We have double standards with each other, even as fellow women. Like we'll look at what this person did wrong, and it doesn't have to be just like male-female relationships or like anything like that. Sometimes even in like acquaintances where it's like, you know, where people like gang up on other people and they're like, oh, so and so doesn't like her, so we don't talk to her.
I never get those.
I don't get that either. But it's things that happen. And I feel like it even in this day, like especially in this day, it very much plays into those dynamics that have bled through the centuries. And it's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
I think that's why a lot of times women have hard times finding friends within other women.
Yes.
Because of these like competitions or like standards that are being held within each other, that like I'm holding you to the standard but not myself. But I think I'm trying to figure out how to word it, because like I know that the mindset that I have when I go into friendships, right? And I know that anything that I hold you to, I would hold myself to as well, because otherwise that's just hypocritical.
Right.
So I also go into these friendships and these relationships with the very like open mindset of like giving people the benefit of the doubt, or like I try to
Give grace.
Give grace, right? So like if I hear that other people are like, I had this experience with this person, and I was like, okay, well I'll definitely take that into consideration, but until that happens, right?
Kind of innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah. So that's why it's like a lot of times I'll have like among a friend group, I'll have someone that has like had an issue with someone and they're talking to me about it, and it's like, okay, I understand. I will definitely give you my feedback based off of what you're telling me, but that's not really going to affect my friendship with this person.
Right.
I mean, until they drop my name in somewhere.
Then it gets real. Then it gets personal.
Yeah.
No.
But I think I've noticed this more often, that it's a lot of women are having that mindset as well, but there are also a lot of women that are pretending to, but still seeing that level of competition amongst it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to navigate those situations. But I think we're not even talking about Tamar anymore. But
No. I was gonna say something to like, because I think part of what we want to kick off this month talking about is the plight of women and what women go through and what Tamar went through and the situation she was put in.
Yeah.
That forced her to make these decisions. Because a lot of times we might judge someone, like we were saying, like in friendships, in relationships, of varying degrees. We may judge someone harshly and not know that their back was against the wall.
Like that was what they felt was their only option.
Exactly. So I can only imagine, like, if Tamar had friends in that time, what would their reaction have been? Would they have been supportive? Would they have, and this is all speculative and we're not trying to like rewrite the Bible here at all, but like it makes me think of how lonely she was.
That's what, yeah, I was gonna, I didn't know how to bring that in, but thank you. So, because I'm like, in these situations, you don't really hear a lot about the women having friends, right? Like with men, they have their brotherhood. They have like, you know, the people that they went to school, like, you know, they're working
Yes.
with and stuff.
Because even
But-
Job in the Bible went to his friends.
Or his friends came to him at a certain point,
Exactly.
right? But with these women, it was like, all right, my 2 sons have died, go home. There's no like, was she able to grieve and mourn for her husband? Like, did she have people to also support her in these situations? Because also to go from one brother to the next just because of tradition, I feel like that's a lot.
It's a lot of trauma.
And then especially to like, all right, now you have to conceive a child with him to secure your place in this family. I'm sorry? And then he's like, I don't even want to have a kid with her. So like as a woman, I feel like that's, first of all, that's a lot to go sibling to sibling, but then also you have no place here until you have a child. Yeah. So I have no value at all until I can carry an heir for you.
Yeah. And specifically, and that's the thing, it had to be specifically an heir. It had to be a boy.
A boy, yeah.
And it's very, like we were saying, like that's got to be extremely lonely. Like the things we go through now. And sometimes like when I'm reading the Bible and I read like what these women and what these people went through, I'm just kind of like, oof, maybe my problems aren't that bad. Because most of the time, and I mean that's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. You leave your mother and your father's house and you go and you're there with your husband, your wife, you conceive, you make a family, all of these things. But that is also extremely lonely. Because when I got married, I went from living in one place my whole life with my family, my friends, and all of these things, and coming to a place where I literally had to Google map everywhere I wanted to go. Had to Google map
states.
I switched states. A completely different everything, different home, different church, different everything.
Like culture in
like
general,
a different culture. And it's very lonely. It's something that when you go through it, like if I hadn't, for example, for me, if I hadn't found the like love and acceptance that I found at Faith, I don't know where I would be, because it was very, very hard to transition. And I would be on the phone with my mom, like, I want to go home. And she was like, I'm sorry, babe, that's your home. Like, but you know, with understanding, like if something happens, you can always come home.
Yeah.
But like, they didn't have that back then, is the point I'm trying to make. So she had to make these decisions that just, you know, to us, we're like, and to the general public, it's like, oh my goodness, like she did all this stuff. But it's like, think about it.
What else did she?
Like she felt like she didn't have another choice. She's not overly wicked. She's not, you know, all of these things. Like she didn't have another choice. And sometimes when we feel, and we mentioned it before, when we feel like we don't have a choice, we make wrong decisions.
It's like your fight or flight kicks in.
Exactly. It's like your fight or flight kicks in. And, you know, sometimes you make decisions and then you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like, God, I'm so sorry. Like, that wasn't it. Like, that's not what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But I think the beautiful thing about living now is that we have the option to go to God directly and to ask him for forgiveness. We go through Jesus. Jesus has redeemed us. He has saved us. He died for us. And we have the option now to cry out to him. And we don't have to kill a goat or kill a lamb or a bird or, you know, whatever it was, depending on the size of your sin. We have that direct line. And I think that that's something, like tying it back into now, that I don't think it makes it easier, because I don't think that the walk gets easier. I don't think it gets easier. But it gives us a sense of peace, even in the chaos.
I don't think it gets easier. I think it helps it to be bearable.
Yes.
But I think if it wasn't for Tamar being such a strong like person, I don't think she would have been able to do the things that she was able to do to secure her place.
Yes.
And I think that's what I want to end on. She was a woman that was ahead of her time.
Yes.
I think in terms of the culture that she was in. She was like a wave maker, I would say. And love that for you, girl.
That's Tamar.
That's Tamar.